when I was in Italy. It was a for real time. Some real things that you would consider negative and want to turn away from were occurring. And a big one had just hit. It had just hit. And, you know, the identity was dissolving at this time. And, but not quickly enough. And so a big one had just hit, and I was preparing for that process I just told you about, right? Because the idea is, you know, I tell you, whatever, here, I can do it with you because it's a joke, but like, oh, I'm going to harm you. And watch, just even me saying that, like what happens in the body, right? There's a bracing, first bracing. And so I was accustomed to the process, the bracing. I had been doing everything I could to dissolve it, and I was writing. So I was immersing in that emptiness for hours and hours a day. And here it comes. Ooh, there's the, you know, the rocket's red glare was coming my way. And I prepared because it, you know, you brace and then you feel a little nauseated, and you have this scurrying, and then you have the desperate prayer and all of the things that had happened so many times before. On this particular night, I laid down. You know, it's like you lay down, you lie down, prepare for the anxiety attack or the discouragement or hopelessness. Prayers that occur on top of that can't ever reach it because you've closed yourself off and no prayer could really penetrate. And I laid there, and just in a second, I heard to stay open, which was so antithetical to what I wanted to do. And I did. I stayed just open enough, you know, Leonard Cohen's There's a Crack, that's how the light gets in. Although it was kind of the reverse, because I stayed open just enough for this light that was inside of me to break out. And it, you know, it was like a dimensional climax that wasn't a localized climax. And it broke open. These various ideas, you know, I saw my mind even saying, like, what if that goes, what if that goes, what if I can't function? That was one of the biggest ones. Or what if I look like a crazy woman, as if I had already gone beyond that point, we'll say. It just broke open, and I was in this beautiful monastery in Italy with these glazed brick-colored floors, these huge squares, and you could feel it was saturated in this feeling with the very old kind of white, almost crocheted kind of bedspread, and the full shutters, which we should have in the United States, the wooden shutters that block out all the light. And it just broke open. And when it broke open, it was this buttery, this just unbelievable, rich, buttery light that just kept pouring. It kept pouring from my cells, as if, you know how my favorite time at night is around 6 o'clock, because the trees have been taking in the light all day, and then the sun starts to go down, and then they emit the light, and you can just see this luminescence coming off of them. And it's just so beautiful, and it's like I got to have my time of being that, of not merely taking in, but it came pouring out. And as it came pouring out, what the contraction had been locking in was the imagination of every worst case scenario I could come up with. You know, imagine you get a diagnosis, and from that diagnosis you contract, And for years, every time you go to the doctor, you're in a kind of state because it's activating that fundamental fear, and it's adding to it, and it's getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And then all of a sudden it breaks out. But as it breaks out, and I think this is what death throes are when they talk about death throes, as it breaks out, all of those are coming past your hearing, your vision, your feeling again. And you almost want to grab them like, no, because there's this idea that if we think it, we make it happen. We don't actually live in the mind stream that is the light that just keeps pouring like this river. And they just came pouring out and pouring out for hours. I was in this room, just bathed in this butter light. And then there's for me, and again, this is crazy woman talk. This is Lady of the Mycelium Palace talk. But for me, there was this very quiet voice. And the quiet voice just basically guided me to stay with it. So I did. And you'd think that she would say, everything's going to be okay. You know, that's the religion I grew up in, is, you know, you go to Dad, Jesus, God. I'm Sicilian Catholic. You go to Dad, and Dad just says, everything's going to be okay. Don't you worry. And I'll take all these difficulties away. And by the way, I'm incredibly fond of Jesus, but this is not that story. And there's this nakedness when you're broken open into that light. You're helpless. You know, the gods, the spirits, whatever they are, they have their finger on your spot, and you can't move. You're nailed. And I was nailed with this light. And then what happened was all of the worst case scenarios came out, and I was in all of them. Like, she was generous enough to put me in all of my nightmares and my fears, only she did it with this light in it. And the light was so mesmerizing. I was so transfixed in this light that it did not matter what scene you put me in the imaginal mind. It was better than the ordinary mind of everyday life without a single problem.